He still thinks his friend Vladimir Putin could come through to him. What he really wants is to get out without people thinking he's a loser.
I want to talk now, and welcome to the programme, Donald Trump's former national security advisor during Donald Trump's first term, and of course who's now famously been the focus of outrage, anger and accusation from the president. He's currently, as we have seen, facing a probe by Donald Trump's Department of Justice. I want to get his thoughts now on such issues as the war in Ukraine. Welcome back to the show, Ambassador John Bolton.
Glad to be with you.
It's great to have you here, as always. We saw then the proposed summit in Hungary between President Putin and President Trump. That disappeared. It collapsed. It seems because Putin was said to be sticking to his ambition to keep all the Russian-occupied territory and be handed more, and to want to see Zelensky removed. I mean, there's nothing surprising, is there, about any of that? Putin has been, in that respect, entirely consistent.
Well, he has been, and I think this is one of the quickest on for a summit and then off for a summit in contemporary history. And it shows just one conversation between Trump and Putin can turn things around completely. Now we're back sort of to where we were before. And the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, is in Washington today to meet with Trump. Maybe we'll see what comes out of that meeting. But I think this is another case. If Trump doesn't think he can reach a settlement on Ukraine, or at least a ceasefire that gives him a shot at the Nobel Peace Prize next year, he's going to pull back away from it. Now, I hope that he continues the program of selling weapons and ammunition to Europeans to give to Ukraine. I hope that he continues the supply of intelligence, which is critical and which really U.S. alone is capable of doing. And I hope he comes back to the idea of providing tomahawks with Ukraine. Yes. But I hope at least this time people will understand he's not going to be for Ukraine at any point. He still thinks his friend Vladimir Putin could come through to him. What he really wants is to get out without people thinking he's a loser.
Yeah, I mean, the president was saying in very recent days, and saying clearly wrongly, that Putin was ready to make a deal. He, of course, was not. I mean, knowing President Trump as you do, Ambassador, was Donald Trump misled, or did he just totally misread this man, Putin, that he claims to know so well?
Well, as Simon and Garfunkel once said in one of their famous songs, a man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. And that's what Trump, he wants to hear that his friend Vladimir Putin is going to do a deal with him. And reality just doesn't get in the way of it. So this is another example of that. I think we've seen the same thing in connection with the Gaza peace process, and it's repeating in Ukraine. I don't think this is going to move Trump too much one way or the other. Yeah. I think he's got to turn his attention to something else, like making the biggest trade deal in history with China, which is how he sees it. He's tried for 9 months on Ukraine now. He's been frustrated at every turn. It looks like it's in a world where there are only winners and losers and Trump is only a winner, this is not going to be a winner. So he's going to find something else to do. So
it sounds, Ambassador, if you're not one of those who believe or who suspect that President Trump is, as it were, in sympathy, quietly in sympathy with Vladimir Putin, simply just not making the right calls.
He's in sympathy with Donald Trump. That's all he's in sympathy with. And he saw in his very non-philosophical, non-strategic, non-policy-oriented way the possibility of a deal that would get him a lot of positive attention. He's tried in many different ways to find that deal. He hasn't found it. I think he's perhaps beginning to realize he's not going to find it, so he's going to look somewhere else.
Do you support the idea, which is now very much on the table in the corridors of the European Union, to seize and use those Russian assets, those frozen Russian assets, adding up to something over 300 billion euros? If the European Union Council could tomorrow decide that money should be seized and then used to fund a loan not liable for repayment to Ukraine. There are doubts about the legality and the wisdom of doing that in the United States. We know. Your position on it, Ambassador?
Well, the U.S. and others have done this sort of thing before. After Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in 1990 and then was driven out by the U.S. and coalition forces, various Iraqi assets that had been frozen were seized and used in the partial funding of the reconstruction of Kuwait. So it wouldn't be the first time that this sort of thing has happened. I think from the U.S. point of view, there's a prudential question that I've asked that I've never heard an answer to yet, which is we went along with this proposal here. How much would the U.S. be in jeopardy of having adversaries of ours seize our assets, governmental and private,
Yes.
and put them to uses that they deem proper? I don't object to it in principle. I'd just like to know what the potential harm is to the U.S. and I would think European countries would want that same assessment. I haven't heard anybody give it. It looks like a big pot of money to go after. I understand that.
Yeah.
As I say, I don't object in principle. I just want to know what the potential downside is before we jump into it.
Okay, you do not object in principle. You want the implications maybe considered very, very closely. I want to move on to Gaza, if I can, for a moment, because we've seen the Vice President, J.D. Vance, is there, and so is the President's advisor and an envoy, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. Now, the Vice President today is speaking very positively, very optimistically about the possibility of progress being made. Now, knowing the area, knowing the players in the region as you do you share that optimism?
Well, I do not, but I also note the Vice President said this is going to take a long time, and that is correct. Whether it's going to work or not work, we're not going to have peace in the Middle East anytime soon. And I think that's one way of being optimistic, but not necessarily forecasting anything's going to happen. The next crucial step is the demilitarization of Hamas, the disarming, the dismantlement of their underground tunnel network, really demolishing Hamas as a political as well as a military organization. And I have to say, in the Gaza Strip today, I don't see much evidence they're getting ready to do it. What they seem to be doing is crushing some small elements of opposition among Palestinians, among Gazans, whether they're called local tribes or gangs or however you want to characterize them. Hamas has been lining up their supporters and killing them, which is a way to teach other Gazans a lesson: don't cross Hamas. So until somebody figures out how that demilitarization of Hamas is going to take place, which is foundational to every other step in the plan, I don't see the rays of optimism.
I'm keen to get your thoughts on some of the very, very big politics being played out in your own country, in the United States at the moment. And I do recognise you are inhibited from discussing the case brought against you now by the President's Department of Justice. But more broadly, there are cases before Supreme Court, the state federal judges on the deployment of National Guard troops into American cities, American Democrat-controlled states. What is your take on those?
Well, I think this has largely been a political effort by Trump. It makes him look tough. It makes him look like he's cracking down on crime. I think the United States has always tried hard to separate the military from law enforcement. I think that's the right thing to do. I think most Americans would say they'd like stronger law enforcement. They'd like to see less crime. And I believe that's a correct position, but you don't need the National Guard to do it. It's a way of looking good for Trump, but it also shows really why he's not a conservative. In America, conservatives believe in what we call federalism, which is problems are solved at the level closest to the people. So cities and county governments, then state government, and the federal government only as a last resort. Now, that principle has been violated for 100 years or so by the left in America, but conservatives should still believe it. Donald Trump doesn't, because he's at the federal level and he wants to be the center of everything.
I mean, I look on my social media feed. I'm just looking a few moments ago, and I can see a picture of the president in the Oval Office, and on the Resolute desk, that famous historic desk in the Oval Office, there are sitting two of those red caps with Trump 2028 all over the front of those caps. Now, there are those who suggest, Gavin Newsom, the opponent to the president, who's the governor of California, is suggesting out loud that he thinks the president might try to disregard the requirement for a president to stand down after 2 terms. Is there anything in that, or is that threat feeling overblown?
Well, I think Trump knows no limits, so you can never rule anything out. But I think at this point, it's mostly trying to troll the left. He's appealing to his base. They love the idea. As a practical matter, I don't know how he gets on the ballot in enough states to get 270 electoral votes. It's so flatly contrary to the Constitution that it's hard to think even he thinks he can get beyond it.
All right, I'll have to leave that there for now. Ambassador John Bolton, good to talk to you as always. Thank you.